Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: AI-driven robotics could give China future warfare edge, US national debt tops $40 trillion, Russians withdraw $28 billion from banks fearing Kremlin will seize savings for war, DRC and M23 agree to a roadmap for Sudan peace talks, and natural cloud factory could reshape Arctic warming. Starting with politics, former Liberian vice president charged in drug trafficking probe. Liberia has charged former Vice President Howard Taylor with drug trafficking, money laundering, and a range of other offences. Howard Taylor, who served as vice president for 6 years to 2024, was detained before boarding a flight to leave Liberia. Opposition leader Mundubile court action to overturn Zambia election result. The nation's electoral commission declared incumbent President Hichilema the winner of the election, giving him a second 5-year term. The election was marred by accusations of interference and by arrests of opposition figures. Pro-presidential party in Kazakhstan won 71% of votes. The result for Adilet, which incorporated the previous ruling party, Amanat, is likely to consolidate President Tokayev's power. U.S. cancels joint marine drills with South Korea over Iran war-related force constraint. The cancellation follows President Trump's surprise order to scale back a separate annual joint military exercise, citing the cost and Seoul's refusal to take part in the Iran war. DRC and M23 agree to a roadmap for peace talks. The two sides issued a joint statement after meeting in Switzerland to engage in new rounds of peace talks, bringing in representatives from the US, Qatar, Togo, Switzerland, and the African Union Commission. This comes as fighting has persisted since both sides signed an agreement in Doha last year, as disputes continue over critical minerals in the region. Moving to stories in conflict, UAE suspends trade with Iran after renewed missile fire. Formerly important trading partners, the move could further isolate the Islamic Republic, which is facing US sanctions and a blockade. Early in the conflict, the UAE regularly came under fire from Iran, halting most trade. In late June, as hostilities eased, some maritime trade resumed. AI-driven robotics could give China the edge in future warfare. Whichever power can fuse AI with robotics and mass-produce unmanned weapon systems will dominate future conventional wars, and a new analysis says China currently leads on that measure. It identifies Ukraine's production of about 4 million drones and robotic systems last year, against fewer than 3,000 systems delivered under a US drone program by MTD 2026, as evidence of how fast modern battlefields consume unmanned systems. EU approves further $7 billion for Ukraine's defense. The financial aid is to help Ukraine procure new defense systems, such as air defense, missiles, ammunition, and radars. The EU said this latest aid package came on top of $18 billion of previously approved procurement plans. Myanmar military offensive targets land for Russia-backed port project. The campaign to capture and clear land intended for the Dawei Special Economic Zone on the Andaman Sea coast has resulted razed villages, forced local militia groups to retreat, and killed at least 3 aid workers. The project, expected to include a deep-water port and a new power plant, would deepen ties between Russia and Myanmar's government, led by former junta commander-in-chief Min Aung Hlaing. UK to use Ukraine battlefield data to train AI to protect sensitive sites. The deal is to help detect protesters and hostile state activity targeting UK defence sites, railways and energy plants, and will be piloted at a UK defence site using AI-optimised sensors in buried fibre optic cables to detect movement. The technology could be extended to airports, prisons, railways and energy infrastructure if proven. Now for the latest economics news. US national debt tops $40 trillion. US debt is growing faster than predicted in part due to tax cuts under recent tax and spending legislation, with economists also citing a longer history of contributing factors, including tax cuts under former President Bush, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and pandemic-era spending under former President Biden. Interest costs are now the third largest item in the US budget after healthcare and social security. Russians withdraw $28 billion from banks in 2026, fearing Kremlin will seize savings for war. As Ukrainian drone strikes on oil refineries and logistics infrastructure deepened the economic crisis in Russia, fear spread that the Kremlin could move to freeze or nationalize private deposits to fund its war in Ukraine. Droughts drive up prices in Europe. Extreme weather conditions are impacting supply chains across Europe, with the Rhine experiencing record low water levels, and economists warning of increases in cost for energy sources as transport becomes less efficient. UN data indicates food prices are about 30% higher than in 2020, with global inflation rates significantly impacted by these supply bottlenecks, alongside other global price shocks. Norway says it will drill in Arctic regardless of EU's position. Norway will continue developing its oil and gas resources in the Barents Sea regardless of the European Union's support for a moratorium on Arctic hydrocarbon supplies, and no longer sees itself as Europe's green battery. Following Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Norway has become Europe's largest supplier of natural gas, meeting around 30% of gas demand of both the EU and Britain. Aging population and healthcare costs driving social budget in Germany to record high. Old age and illness now account for roughly 70% of German social expenditure, and more than 80% of its real increase since 1992. Real social spending rose by about $120 billion, or 11.5%, between 2019 and 2025, reaching a record 32% of GDP. Turning to development. New US crypto rules to help digital asset industry. The US Securities and Exchange Commission is offering firms two clear paths to raise money without full securities registration. Industry groups have broadly welcomed the plan, calling its terms considerably more generous than anticipated. Taiwan proposes record-high $35 billion defense budget. This signals an 18% increase in military spending from the 2026 budget, amounting to approximately 3% of its GDP amid pressure from the US to increase spending. This follows the record 266-day delay of the central government's budget and greater intensity of the annual Hanquang drills earlier this month, as concerns continue over China's military presence in the region. Lebanon, first country in Middle East to abolish death penalty. Until the Lebanese parliament vote, death by hanging and firing squad was possible. Europe raced to refill gas storage as LNG cargoes flow to Asia. After spending the past 2 years rebuilding its gas security, following the loss of Russian pipeline supplies, Europe is facing high natural gas prices due to volatility in global markets linked to disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. As liquefied natural gas, LNG, exports from the Gulf are increasingly diverted to Asia, the bloc's 90% storage target is now effectively out of reach. DRC to receive 70,000 doses of Ebola vaccine used in past outbreaks. The supplies from the UN's International Vaccine Coordination Group are to protect frontline communities against the Ebola virus disease. The Ervebo vaccine was initially developed to target the Zaire Ebola virus, which caused the deadliest Ebola outbreak on record. Finally, our social news. Giant whales move into Greenland waters as ice disappears. Sea ice has been disappearing from East Greenland, allowing giant whales to take advantage and move into previously inaccessible areas. AI adoption could deplete collective professional expertise. A new paper argues that as AI reshapes cognitive work, individuals' rational decisions to adopt it could gradually erode the shared pool of expertise that professions need to renew themselves, applying the economic theory of the tragedy of the commons to what the authors call the cognitive commons. Early evidence from highly AI-exposed sectors points to possible disruption to how expertise is passed on. Groundwater reserve in Asia losing 24 billion tons of water yearly. A new satellite-based study in China has found the reserves beneath high mountain Asia are declining at an increasing rate, an area coined the Asian Water Tower due to the hundreds of millions of people and dozens of countries that rely on it. Nearly half of the changes to groundwater systems have been linked to climate-related forces, with current water use patterns also contributing to the decline. More than 4 million electric vehicles recalled in China over hidden door handles. China's biggest ever car recall includes 2.98 million Chinese-made Teslas, along with vehicles from XPeng, Xiaomi and Geely, over concerns that the popular retractable door handles are difficult to locate and open in emergencies. Natural cloud factory could reshape Arctic warming. Scientists have discovered a powerful particle-forming process that influences higher cloud formation where the Arctic sea ice meets open ocean. This can be applied optimistically to climate models, as clouds are crucial in how heat is retained or reflected. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.